So good, so good, so good.
New spring arrivals are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Get ready to save big with up to 60% off Rag & Bone, Marc Jacobs, Free People, and more.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Because there's always something new.
Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nerding Out on Neurodiversity, the podcast for all things neurodivergence. I'm Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist and professional speaker, and I'm happy to be your host through the wild trails of the neurodivergent world.
And I'm Jake Noonan, educational coach and humanities teacher, your co-host and producer, and I'm thrilled to help share the stories and the experiences of wonderful people in the world of neurodiversity.
We're really excited for today's guest, which we are going to say a lot because we're always really excited about every guest we get. So let's get into it. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Matt checking in with you from the future. While we were recording this episode, you may remember from my social media posts that I was dealing with a lovely combination of Lyme disease and Bell's palsy. So my voice might sound a little strange. Thanks to the magic of Jake's editing, I'm going to sound as normal as possible. But if you have any trouble understanding it, it's not your computer, it's me. If you have any trouble, feel free to email us and we will give you the transcript. But otherwise, enjoy the episode. We love you very much. Take care. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nerding Out on Neurodiversity. I'm your host, Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist, professional speaker, published author, podcast host, wearer of many, many, many hats. With me, as always, is the Raphael to my Donatello, Mr. Jake Noonan. Say hi, Jake.
Hey, everybody. Great to be here as always. Raphael this time, not Donatello this time. You can take Donatello. I'll stick with Raphael.
I will always take Donatello. Always.
I do love Donatello, though.
Are we going Ninja Turtle here or Renaissance?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Why not both?
Fair question. With this group, you never know. It could be both.
It could go either way.
It's true.
Oh, man. We have a really exciting guest today. James, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, yes. My name is James Burton. I'm a speech language pathologist and recently turned more of a, I don't know if the word coach is even right, more of a guide when it comes to stuttering. So I help professionals and entrepreneurs who stutter speak freely and fearlessly, even when speech therapy hasn't worked.
And that's so important. Tell us, for people who don't know, what is a stutter?
So a stutter, what we've recently come to the conclusion as the experts in stuttering, the people who wrote my textbook when I was in grad school, this caliber of expert. In 2023, they came up with a study, which was more of it was a conference, and it was a discussion of stuttering as neurodivergence. And when I heard this, it was like something just clicked into place. I'm like, of course it's neurodivergence. Why do I've been thinking of it this way, but without the label? And the label isn't necessary, but it could be useful in some ways. And I was like, okay, now all my work with neurodivergent people in the past makes sense in this context, and I was able to redesign a program that is far more effective than previously.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I have a question from that is for everybody listening who's a stutter as neurodivergence, how is that the same? How is that connected? Can you just explain how that overlap is there?
Okay, well, when we think of neurodivergence, we just think of that normal spectrum, right? And when I say normal, I mean in a statistical way.
Yeah.
The normal curve, and there's like most people are in the middle, and on either end you have, and going out to infinity, you have differences and differences and differences. And the more you go out to one end of the scale, the more pronounced those differences tend to be. So like if you're talking about someone with autism, you have someone who's verbal and thinks a little bit differently, all the way down to the profound end, where they're nonverbal and very challenging to communicate. And the same thing is true in all sorts of different things. ADHD, you have different like degrees of it, say. And so stuttering is just the same. It affects 1% of the population across all cultures. Now, there's a bit more identification of it in men than women, but I have a feeling that there's more women who stutter that are just better at masking at it. So I think that those numbers are huge. But these kinds of numbers, no actual explanation has ever been really found for what causes it. So it fits right into neurodiversity. The classic example, and why I didn't go into this years ago, I don't know.
So if we attach this to the neurodiversity movement, where we say fundamentally differences aren't deficits, how does stuttering fit that worldview? Because I think for a lot of people, stuttering is seen as a deficit.
Yes, absolutely. And certainly it is inconvenient, but it also comes with a lot of baggage that has nothing to do with communication. And it has a lot more to do with how we view ourselves. And when the world tells you, either implicitly or explicitly, that the way you speak is not correct, and that if you don't speak a certain way, with a nice, rude way, then you're wrong, and that gets internalized. And so what happens is people who stutter tend to be trying to mask it or hide it most of the time, just trying to sound normal. And that creates all kinds of psychological challenges. When you feel broken on the inside, when you feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with you, that gets into a lot of avoidance behavior. The avoidance behavior, trying to avoid stuttering, how can I think around this word? How can I say this in a way where I won't? Starts to take up all of this space in your mental capacity. And we're spending so much time avoiding, we're not focusing on communicating. And that tends to make the stutter more pronounced, or more likely, people just aren't going to say anything. And this is the real challenge. If the only problem was sounding fluent, most people who stutter have got that. They can sound fluent, but on the inside, it's a struggle. They're avoiding, they're thinking. It's all of those things that become more of the problem than the speech itself.
Yeah, that anticipatory anxiety is huge.
Huge.
In the case I work with stutter, because it's like I can have 300 words in this monologue, but I can't say word 117, so I won't say any of the words.
Exactly. What I'm really wanting to offer people is, I don't want to necessarily, like, we have speech tools, absolutely. We can smooth speech out. We can make it sound pretty, no problem. But what I want people to be able to do is feel like they can let that go, that need for perfection. Because as that is let go, that anticipatory anxiety starts to alleviate, the physiological challenges that tightening, all of those kind of things tend to dissipate. And what's more important than getting everyone to sound so perfect is that what I love to see is one of my clients is able to go out there, do a presentation, talk to the person they want to talk to, go to the job interview. They go and they actually do stutter, but they're okay. That to me is as big a victory, or even perhaps more of a bigger victory than getting through it and like, oh, I made it that time, right?
How difficult is it for the people you work with, the people you talk to internalize that? Because I know that I had a friend growing up who had a really bad stutter, and for him, it was a lot of the internal, but there was probably, because of the timing that I grew up, a lot of the making fun of him because he stuttered kind of aspect. So how does that end up impacting everybody?
Hugely. I mean, those external lacks of validation, those people looking at you with a funny look, or are you okay, or interrupting, finishing sentences, all of these things that we're sort of trying to help, but it just sort of points out the difference. All of that gets internalized. And this is by far, I think, the bigger problem when it comes to stuttering than the speech itself. It's these internalized views of ourselves as broken in some way. If only I could speak normally, then I wouldn't have the problem. And the way to address that is not through solely cosmetic means, although that is okay to use. There's nothing wrong with that if you want to. Use a sort of a spiritual term. If you shine a light of consciousness on those dark sides of yourself, on those shadows that are subconsciously programming how you interact with the world. Don't talk to that person, I'm going to stutter. Don't go for that job interview, I'm going to stutter. If you can start to address those and do the things while scared and prove to yourself that it can be done, that's when we see huge amounts of progress. And it's not just a surface progress, it's a deep, deep progress.
So how do you do this? Like what's the secret sauce?
Oh, how do I do it? Sorry. Did I miss part of the question there? I apologize. So one of the biggest tools I use is acceptance commitment therapy. So ACT is yes, I love it. So as you probably know, it's an offshoot of CBT a little bit later. And the idea of being able to observe a thought, whether it is a good thought, whether it's a negative thought, and let it go like clouds in the sky. The idea of the self as the space of awareness, as opposed to the ego. All of these kinds of Jungian concepts with ACT, meditation, this is how we get to the deep stuff. And when people are ready, and I have to stress that this is a very personal process, and how people need to go about this differs. And so we have to be very dynamic in how we help people. Some people want one-on-one, but if it is possible eventually to get to a point where you can meet other people who stutter, there's so much power in that. And you see that with the National Stuttering Association, but usually the number of people who stutter who are in those organizations compared to the vast number of people who stutter in the world, which is about, I think, 80 million people worldwide stutter. The number of people in those organizations compared to that number is pretty small. So because it's a certain amount of courage to go out and, okay, I'm a person who stutters and I'm going to meet other people who stutter, and there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of myth behind that. You know, if I go around other people who stutter, I'm going to stutter more, it's going to get worse. Things like that. These kinds of ideas are right. There's so much misinformation in the stuttering world.
With that, what's like the most irritating misinformation out there for you?
Yeah.
I mean, as an ally, as opposed to a person who stutters, the thing that irritates me, I suppose, is when I go onto forums and I know I can't say anything because I'm a therapist and these forums are for people with who stutter, who interact with each other, and it's not a place to advertise or say a certain way is the right way. So I have to keep my mouth shut. And I watch all of this misinformation, people feeling so broken, and I just want to sometimes reach out and like give some more of the real information. Like stuttering does not mean somebody's nervous. Stuttering does not mean someone's stupid. In fact, obviously, it's the opposite. People who stutter tend to be on the more intelligent side. There was even a study that showed it didn't quite come out statistically significant, but they were skewed in that direction. So, and what drives me crazy, although I don't judge people for it, is how internalized it is. It just pains me to see people thinking of themselves in ways that I just know aren't true, because I'm in a weird position. I know so many different people who stutter, and I've met so many people who stutter over the years, and I know they're incredible human beings, but mostly they've never met anybody else who stutters, or some relative, and they're feeling isolated, alone, like the only person with this problem. And it's scary to meet other people. And so you like disconnect this far away from like self-acceptance. It just doesn't happen because of all these myths. So that drives me nuts.
I remember in grad school saying like stuttering is exacerbated by nervousness. And like maybe that's true, but this is the fundamental nature of the problem. And connecting that to a brain difference I think is everything. It gives that clarity of purpose and externalizes the rationale. So you don't have kids going, I'm broken, I'm screwed up, I can't make the duh sound. So how are you fighting back on this misinformation, on these myths?
How to find, I mean, this is where I love group discussion, but obviously we can do this one-on-one in therapy. Now, I'm mostly working with adults at this point, but I've worked with the whole age range. And the reason that I like working with adults is we can really get into some pretty deep discussions about this misinformation, and we can start to unpack it. But the group situation, when people are expressing their story and how they were treated and how they perceived it, how they perceived how they were treated, which is really everything. It's not so much what happens to you, but how you interpret what happens to you. And if you're interpreting everything through a lens where people are judging me for my speech, then you're going to see people judging you for your speech. Those kinds of those neutral expressions that you sometimes see on someone's face. Quick look to the left, or they look at their phone, or they those little things could be anything. But if you're focused on, oh, my speech is perfect, you're going to interpret that a certain way more often than it may be meant that way. So it colors everything about the way you interpret the world. If you've got this talk, this negative self-talk, and so facing those demons, really examining, are my thoughts about myself, are my thoughts about the way I speak even accurate, or are they colored by trauma, emotion, and then to have a supportive environment in which we can unpack that. I don't think I mentioned the stuttering iceberg. This is a very powerful analogy. So Joseph Sheehan, like, he was a stuttering expert back in the 50s and 60s. And he talked about the stuttering iceberg. You got the tip of the iceberg is what you see, which is like the stuttering itself, the repetitions, the blocks. What you don't see is all of that stuff underneath the iceberg, and that's the negative self-talk. That's the mental lens with which we view the world. And so you can work on the speech. I mean, you can work on the top of that iceberg all you like. You can get it nice and smooth, and it sounds good. Everyone sounds nice, and I'm not stuttering, and oh, I got this. But underneath the iceberg, all of those thoughts are still there. All of the, oh, if I talk to this person, I might still stutter, and so the avoidance behavior is still there. So if we don't deal with that, then the iceberg just sort of floats up, and you've got a new tip, and it's you haven't really. And this is what I found. This is what I found when I used to work just on speech. I would make great progress. Everyone's like feeling great about themselves, and then a few weeks or a couple months later, it's like it starts to go away, and they have to come back and haven't taken that iceberg to warmer water and let it melt, or let it melt naturally. Work on melting it as opposed to chipping away at the top.
Which is so consistent with ACT, right? Like, it isn't just you and not how you think about it. It's also how your environment provides feedback.
Mm-hmm. And how you interpret the feedback.
Take the iceberg somewhere warmer. What a great idea.
That's what that warm environment. I have been lucky in the sense that since I'm around so many people who stutter, and I've gotten so used to it, and I really don't think of it in any different way, that usually when my clients come to me, they very quickly feel comfortable because they sense that. And if I could change anything about the world, it would be to give more people this sort of experience that I've had as part of the normal spectrum. And then you don't have to worry, like, how do I act when someone stutters in front of them? You don't have to act a certain way. You know that they're fine anyway. It's like, oh, I'm interrupting, and I gotta make sure I keep eye contact. This is all very complex. You know, this is now speaking to the neurotypical people that want to interact with someone who's there. So if you know in your heart this is not an issue, there's even wrong with this person, then you don't have to think about how you have to interact with them.
So telling you a little bit more about this, like, social feedback loop. Like, I'm worrying about stuttering, so I don't want to talk to you. You know I stutter, so you're hyper vigilant around me stuttering. I feel like we have two of you who are like doing an anxious dance around a thing that they're so worried will happen, they end up making it happen. And it feels like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that, self-fulfilling prophecy. You know what was a really interesting story I heard once from a friend who stutters? And so she said, when she met somebody else that stuttered, she worked extra hard on not stuttering because you didn't want that person to think that he was making fun of them.
Hmm.
So now you've got two people who stutter, who could be connecting on something and saying, "Oh, I see you. You're like me." Instead of having that interaction, they're like, "Oh my God," and they're both trying to hide it from each other, which makes complete logical sense on one level, but is so detrimental to what I would love to see is this momentum of normalization. It shouldn't need to be normalized because it is normal, but it doesn't treat it as normal.
Well, and I think you just said something really important. Just because something is normal doesn't mean we don't have to normalize it. Like he will have been fidgeting to self-regulate for as long as there have been people. But we still need to set expectations. It's one less conversation we need to have. An ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure, of course. So to me, it's like, how do we combat the misinformation with good information? How do we get the narrative out there?
Organizations like this National Stuttering Association are fantastic. And there's things like We Stutter, but I think what happens is because so many people they don't want to look at it. They've not wanted to look at it their entire life. Looking at it makes them have to think about it. And often in the beginning stages of that doesn't help. It actually makes it more intense. Now I'm thinking about my speech, so people are actively not looking for this information unless they hit a crisis point or it's severe enough, they have a big enough challenge that they reach out. But mostly they're just trying not to have to think about this. And it kind of has this suppression effect, which you try and push a beach ball under the water, coming straight back out. Yeah, okay. So
I use that all the time.
yeah, I love talking to psychologists and teachers because they're working in a school for kids with neurodivergence for so long. I'm in my element now. We speak each other's language.
And then the beach ball comes back and hits you in the face.
Yes. You guys are in education. When kids accept themselves, maybe they're not super awesome at one subject and they're struggling, they have to work a little bit harder, but when they accept themselves who they are, you see all sorts of blossoming. But when it's like unaccepted, it can cause so much damage over time. And I love to do these kinds of conversations. The more conversations I can have about stuttering in a public forum, and the more I can just begin to work on these myths and work on the misinformation. So thank you guys so much for having me so I can talk about this.
Thank you for being here 100%. And that also leads me into a more unique kind of question that I feel like you've probably talked about here and there, probably pretty frequently with your clients, is Biden's stutter.
Yeah.
How pronounced it was and how representative it was in a sense, but then also the social and the cultural backlash and the support, where you have the split dichotomy between both of them. And I'm just curious, what's your perspective on that? And then how your clients end up handling that?
The thing that I keep coming back to is the fact that someone who stuttered for at least 1 4-year term was the most powerful man in the world. But what does that mean for people who stutter? It means you can do anything, right? You can do anything. If someone can be the president of the United States, you can do anything. That's what I like to look at. When it gets to the politics, I don't usually like to talk about politics in this sense, just because it's so divisive. And I don't know how much of that was about stuttering and how much of that was about votes. So, if you don't like Biden, stuttering is bad. And if you do, it's good. I don't know. But I just keep coming back to that. If he can be the president of the United States, you can do anything.
I love that because I can only imagine what your clients, knowing that we talked about their entire psychological background in a sense, growing up all the way to now, seeing all of those kind of things, hearing all those kind of things around them, and then also working with somebody who's all right, cool, we're going to deal with the internal thoughts first, the internal versus the external, understand both, and then work to adjust as we need. Having both of those, I feel could be incredible for some of your clients when it comes to misrepresentations, seeing Biden successful and having you back that up.
Yeah, and there's like so many cool things are happening. I don't know if you guys are Survivor fans, but there was a contestant on Survivor who stuttered, and he talked about it openly. That was amazing because I'm a big Survivor fan. I mean, I haven't watched as much since my divorce because my ex-wife were like hardcore fans, but yeah, I was like so psyched that it was that platform. And there's so many people who stutter out, like Samuel L. Jackson, Tiger Woods, Emily Blunt, like all of these very successful people. But
James Earl Jones. James Earl
James
Jones.
Earl Jones, Darth Vader himself stutter. A lot of these people, this is the interesting thing, is a lot of these people, obviously, in order to reach where they are, they didn't just have to work on their speech, although many are actors, they're good at stuff like that. At some level, there was a level of self-acceptance because the fact that we know that they stutter, that they talk about it openly, and they're out there doing these big things. At some level, they came to terms with it internally. Not everybody needs support for that, but a lot of people do. A lot of people do. One might ask, why is someone who doesn't stutter so passionate about stuttering? And I'm kind of asking myself a question now, but I'm just going to go for this.
Thanks for stealing our next question, James. Geez.
Sorry about that. It happened because when I was in grad school, I was lucky enough to get a practicum, Columbia Speech and Language Services in Vancouver. And this was a 10-day intensive workshop. Now, I don't do it this intensive anymore. I don't think it's necessary. But this was 10 days in a row of 8 hours a day working on speech. And the difference between the severity, the intensity of these client stutters was so high. And at the end, they're all speaking fluently. They're all in tears. They're hugging. They're making plans. I'm going to go. One of the guys was a line cook, and he wanted to be a lawyer, but he thought he never could because of his stutter. And he's like, I'm going to apply for law school. Like, amazing. This changed my life watching this transformation. But there's a little bit of a seed in that because I started doing things the same way, loving this, watching the change, feeling very confident in my abilities to change the speech pattern. But then when I got really excited and I was ready to move on from working in the schools, and I was like kind of reaching burnout level there, I think you guys can probably understand.
Yeah, just a little bit.
yeah, it's tough, right? I also lost the hearing in my right ear from a brain tumor, which I had surgery for. So like it was really hard to work in a loud school when you can only got your whole field of sound. It's everything all at once. So I had to make a switch. So I was I'm gonna do what I'm really good at. I'm gonna go focus on stuttering. So I reached out to one of my old clients, and this is where the bottom dropped out for me temporarily, is because I expected him to be killing it. He's one of my best clients. This is from 10 years ago. I haven't talked to him in nearly a decade. Just figured he's fine. He did so well. And I call him up and we're talking on Zoom, and he looks at me through the screen and he's like, James, I don't know what happened. I fell into old patterns. I started avoiding again. And now it's just like, it's as bad as it ever was. And he used the word bad, which is not something I normally do when it comes to stuttering, but that's what he said. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because here I was thinking I had helped this person and they were doing fine and feeling really good about themselves. And it wasn't sticking because it was cosmetic. We work on speech. And yes, even in those days, even way back in those days, we'd done some work with a psychologist friend of mine. I went and like observed. I wanted to get everything, but it just wasn't enough. And so what I realized was it was way too heavily weighted on cosmetics and speech, and nowhere near weighted enough on internal demons and facing the myths. And so that's when I started to get into ACT. That is also when I started a personal journey. I literally got back 2 days ago from a 9-month world tour of India, Nepal, Mexico, and Peru. And in that time, I had to do a lot of my own sort of shadow work, facing my own demons, not being enough. Like, why is this taking so long? And I'm not good enough. And I used to have a career, and now I'm taking these big risks, and all this kind of stuff and I had faced those demons. Having done that, done some meditation, doing some vipassana, traveling, and really working and facing those things, I have released so much that my day-to-day life is much happier now, much calmer and much more grounded. And that is what I want to do. And I've noticed that in my therapy sessions have improved dramatically since I grounded myself.
Yeah, I wish we had more interesting guests. Damn, like, what are we going to talk to this guy about? 9-month world tour, and you're a brain tumor survivor. I'm also a brain tumor survivor. So, like, it's a club nobody wants to be in, but I'm glad you're in it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're okay too.
So let's anchor on that for a second. Meditation, journaling, mindfulness, they have been shoved down the population's throat with the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where I think people don't want to do them. They're like, I don't want to meditate. I don't want to sit in silence. Like, how does it help you? How does it ground you? Because I think it's all do it and no one's connecting it to outcome. Like, what changes have you seen in you?
I think people dislike meditation because I think they have a view of it that it's supposed to be bliss and it's supposed to be lovely and restful, and then when they sit down, it's not, and they're having thoughts, and it's difficult, and they're distracted, and it's not pleasant, and I'm doing it wrong. I can't do this. Forget about it. So, what meditation is for me is uncomfortable. It's supposed to be uncomfortable sometimes because you're facing things that you don't want to look at. The lightness, it's hard to explain in words, but the lightness that one feels after having done some of this work, and I don't want people to think that in my program we're just going to meditate and this is like, and they're going to force you to do all these boring things and sit with your pain and all that kind of thing. There's a lot more to it than that. But that is the fundamental change that happens as you burn off these negative thought patterns, the ones that unconsciously program you to hold yourself back. For example, let's say someone who stutters and they've been stuck in a job they don't like because to get the promotion, they would have to talk to more people and they don't want to. So every time the opportunity comes up, they find a reason subconsciously to either screw up the interview, not apply, or just tell themselves they can't do it. This is all unconscious. Those kinds of thoughts weren't stuttering related for me, but those kind of thoughts, now I am aware of them when they come up, and I can let them go in the moment. That is how you actually see progress, because if you are aware of the subconscious thoughts that are controlling your actions, it puts you back in the driver's seat. Is that concrete enough for you? Because I can get more concrete, I think.
I like it, Jake.
We're good? We're good? Okay, go.
Yeah.
Audio podcast, Jake. Audio podcast. They can't see
Oh, right. Audio podcast. Yeah.
That was for you too.
So let me ask you this. What does an ideal outcome look like for someone who stutters? Is it living your best life? Is it mastering your speech? Is it some combination? Like, when do you look at a client like, we're good, we're done? Like, what is that outcome?
Okay, so I've just reached that point with one client. Just reached that point. What it looks like is, I don't want people to think of this as a problem that is like got a one-day fix, because that model, I tried that model and it doesn't work, and it sets people up for failure. What we're looking for is general, starting to feel confident speaking, no matter how it comes out. So this client that I've had, yes, her speech has smoothed out a great deal. But what really makes me happy is the fact that she's putting herself out there repeatedly. I don't want to give away too much information, but she asked her coach to be made a more important member of the team, and he was made that more important member of the team. He's excelling in her education at the moment. He is not afraid who do the oral presentations in her education system. She is occasionally getting up there and it is stuttering and moving through it, but most of the time it's very, very smooth. And so what success looks like to me is putting yourself out there, doing things scared. That is more success than perfect speech. But thankfully, as we begin to accept ourselves, as we begin to put ourselves out there, even though it's scary, our body is able to regulate in these situations where we were previously dysregulated. Then we also see smoother speech across the board. Expecting it to be perfect at all times is a trap. It's like expecting the kid with dyslexia to now be the fastest reader in the school. Like, he's always going to have a bit of a challenge there. We just want to get him into like a functional, like an easy reading range, right? We're not trying to get that person to now be the tip top. So accepting that stutters will happen sometimes, putting yourself out there anyway, that is success. And then smooth speech tends to follow. It is the result of, not the cause of, confidence.
Love that. Jake, you look deep in thought.
I am, and I have a completely different train of thought that was kind of connecting back to what you were saying earlier with your trip abroad.
Do it.
It's, what did you notice, like professionally, personally, and like historically in a sense, how the treatment of mental health and/or stuttering was in those countries compared to our country? And, well, I guess America and Canada, I guess I should say.
Yeah, a lot of the time, and I don't want to put any one particular country down, but the awareness of neurodivergence, there's a lot of stuff going on in some of these countries. Day to day, getting by has a lot of challenges. It is understandable that maybe this is not a focus the way it is in other places, but I know there tends to be more bias against people with differences in cultures that don't have the same level of education. And it takes longer for that to trickle down. And so it is incumbent upon the countries that have more education to begin this wave of acceptance so that the other countries that have more challenges can follow along. It's just logical.
Right. Kind of just like their daily life doesn't really lead to the deeper introspection consistently.
I mean, it depends, of course. Like some of the people that I've met in Vipassana, which is one thing I did, was a 10-day silent meditation retreat. Like there's incredible minds and incredible levels of wisdom in these places. I wasn't able to tap into until I went there. So it's certainly not a matter of one is better and one is worse. Like, and that wisdom, whether it comes from Buddhism or Hinduism or Christianity or whatever culture is doing it, that is actually probably more key to the self-acceptance than education around stuttering. But we do need both. Did I do the thing where I didn't answer the question again? No, good.
No, you totally did.
Well, your answers are so rich that my brain goes, I could ask about that, I could ask about that, I could ask about that, I could ask about that. Because I think you model that servant learner practitioner stance, that ethos, because it's like you're not just doing this, you're living it. And you're living it as an ally. We always joke in this field that like all research is research.
Yeah.
What you're you're like the best possible exception that proves the rule. And I love that for us. I think that's awesome. So we can't train Seal to be you. Well, what do you wish other providers knew that you know?
Other providers, like
specifically who work with neurodivergent kids?
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, in the interesting on a professional level, stuttering specialists, people who focus on stuttering within the speech therapy world, make up a very, very tiny percentage. Less than 1% of speech therapists would say that they're experts in stuttering. I mean, I'd say far less than 1%. It's actually, I think in the United States, the official roster of qualified experts in stuttering, which does not disqualify other SLPs who don't have this credential. But these are the ones that officially do. It's like less than 200. And there's like, what, 400 million people in the US or something? 350? There's just not enough people who can help with this. What I've learned in speech therapy is such a broad field, much like psychology and teaching, that you can't be good at everything, but we are expected to be good at everything, especially the school-based SLPs who are generalists, like your GP doctor, right? And we have to know a little bit about everything, and the pressure to know a little bit about everything is huge. Like in many cases, if you're a speech therapist in a school, you got 6 schools, and you're the only one that 6 or 7 schools in a week that you got to run around to. And the other speech therapists have their own 7 schools. They're doing their thing. And yes, you get to talk, but the chance to go deep on any one thing when you're trying to like work with 200 kids, or in my case, when I was at the school for neurodivergence kid, I had a caseload of around 70 in 3 days a week. And that is just, it's hard to go deep. And stuttering, you need to go deep. It's not something that you can like give a quick home program. Here, work on your S sound and go do this with mom and come back and it's fine. Like it's not happening. And we don't have the resources in the schools to be doing this. In an ideal world, we would have the money for this, but it is not the case. So if by all means, go to your school speech therapist if you've got a child instead and alert them for this and see what they can do to help. But know that they're going to be stretched insanely thin, and you're going to need to, if you want to go deep on this, you're going to need to find some kind of outside support, and it needs to be someone who specializes, because a little bit of knowledge in this field can be very dangerous, because that is kind of where I was 10, 15, no, 17 years ago when I started. It was all just about speech. It was all just about cosmetics, and we weren't really addressing those underlying issues. I mean, some people were a little bit, but the vast majority are just working on speech. And so that's the mindset that your school speech therapist is probably going to have, unless they have a side specialty. And a good speech therapist, they're very good. They'll probably tell you how much experience they have. But if they're feeling all this pressure to just see every kid that's on their plate, they're going to do their best. So you really have to educate yourself as a parent, as a person who stutters. If you're a person who stutters yourself, it's really important to know where your information is coming from, and whether that's from an expert or from the internet, because there's so much misinformation on stuttering forums as well that it's murky out there. It's not something that people understand a lot about, which I, again, thank you for having me talk about.
All right. Well, that feels like a really lovely message to start moving into our wrap-up questions. So, James, Jake and I will each ask you a question, and then we'll pass the mic over to you, and you can send our audience home with, I don't know if you have any more words of wisdom. I feel like your well is very deep, so we probably have more. You're like, yeah, best fortune cookie ever, this guy. Jake, why don't you ask the first question?
Awesome. James, I'm really curious what your answer for this question is going to be, especially with like the broader like understanding of everything, if you will. What's your favorite word and why?
Oh, geez. Okay. Equanimity.
Okay.
Wow.
But why?
Okay. Because
Such a teacher, Jake. Like, that's a great answer. Like, show your work.
I'm never going to stop being a humanities teacher.
I had to think for a second. I had to come up with the word so equanimity, for those that haven't heard this word, because not everybody has, it is the ability to see the world for what it is without judgment. So when we are able to witness anything that is happening in our lives with equanimity, we maintain inner peace. Equanimity is basically inner peace. It's better than joy. Because joy or happiness comes and then it goes, right? You got your joy, and then you got your sadness and your anger. It's like up and down, and no one can see my hand waving around.
It looks great, though, guys. Trust me. It's really, really spectacular handwriting.
Thank you. I can't help it. I should have been Italian or something. That sense of being equanimous to whatever is happening and maintaining that inner peace. It's my favorite word because it is where I love to reside and try to get back to as much as I can.
That is a fantastic answer.
Mm-hmm.
Just like hands down.
Yeah, like an A plus, Jake.
Yeah. I was gonna say I'm one of those teachers that doesn't really give A pluses, but that's a complete lie.
Oh, thank you, Dave. It's been so long since I got an A in anything. I missed that in grad school.
Do you want a sticker too?
Sticker.
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of stickers.
All right, James, my question is a little bit more lowbrow, perhaps, but it's still fun. If you could have any superhero on speed dial, who would it be and why?
Any superhero. I mean, I kind of feel like when you're talking about superheroes, you have to not count Superman because Superman is just like, he has everything. It's kind of cheating. It's like wishing for more wishes. So obviously it would be Superman, but I'm going to not count that. I'm going to come up with another one. You know what? I think it's Spider-Man because Spider-Man, there's a lot of like personal development that goes on with Spider-Man. There's a lot of like soul searching and trying to figure out who I am as and that is the real journey of life. Know thyself. And I really feel like Spider-Man really tries to know himself over time. And that's more of a superpower than the webs.
I was just talking about this at a talk I did last weekend, that consistently Spider-Man is really the most popular superhero. And Superman is way, way, way down the list because people want to see themselves in the hero. It's hard to see yourself in Superman. Because Superman's like, oh, I'm basically invulnerable. And Spider-Man's a kid who gets the crap kicked out of him, less by supervillains and more by life. Spider-Man doesn't make rent. Spider-Man doesn't get the girl.
He works at a pizza shop.
Clark Kent's like, oh, look at this large car, and now I have Lois Lane. Like, that's successful. So I think you're right. I like that approach to it. And I love that there's data that exists on that too. That makes me very happy.
That's cool. Data's great.
James, this has been a fabulous and rich conversation. What's one more thing you want our listeners to learn from you?
You know, I know I can't just give this by saying it, but I want people to find their self-acceptance. I want people to find what makes them feel whole. However their speech sounds, however they need it to sound to do that, that's their choice. But it's the wholeness that's more important than the cosmetics. And that's what I want people to understand.
Beautifully said. Well, on that really thoughtful note, we're going to wrap up this episode. For all of us here at Nerding Out on Neurodiversity,
I'm so sorry to interrupt you right in the middle of the. I just wondered if I didn't let anyone know how to find me if they were wanting to get some help.
I always forget that. Ah, gosh, I'm sorry. And I would ask Jake to edit it out, but he never does. He likes to make me look like an idiot. So enjoy that, Jake, and put it on the Google Reel.
It'll be my collection. Where can they find you?
So I'm just at stutteringblueprint.com. And this is what I want people to know. The way that I've put it is, if you go to this website, I don't want people to think that it's this big program that I'm going to try and sell them. What it is it's two options. You get to this landing page and you can either send me an email or you can click on the button that says stay connected. And if you choose to stay connected, I'm going to send one email maybe once a week just to remind you that I'm there, send you a little story, some cool thing that happened. What I want people to know is that there is no rush. There's no timeline. People have to come to this when they're ready. Yeah, of course I want to help, but I need to be invited to help. And I want people that want to do it in this way to find that self-acceptance. So this is never going to be a high pressure thing. It's always going to be, I'm here when you need me. So If you come to the website and just want to stay connected and take it at your own pace, that is fine with me. There's no time.
Perfect. That will be in the show notes for everybody listening too.
You're like a ethical mental health vampire. You can't come in unless they invite you in.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my God. Well, I'm glad we got that in, and I'm glad we did this episode. I learned a lot, and I'm going to make sure that my slide deck that includes all our rainbow of neurodiversity is going to include stuttering, because I think this is so important. It's changing mindsets that will change lives. So thank you for that, James. Really, you're a vision, and we're happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you, as always, friends, for trusting us with your time. Jake, do you want to send us out?
Absolutely. Take care, everybody. Great to be here as always. James, thank you so much for coming and sharing all of your experiences, your expertise, and your wisdom. And definitely please keep in touch. And everybody go check out his website, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Nerding Out on Neurodiversity is brought to you by Dr. Matt Zakreski and the team at the Neurodiversity Collective. To learn more about the Neurodiversity Collective or to be a guest on the podcast, please visit our website at www.theneurodiversitycollective.com/podcast. Audio and production by Jake Noonan. Show your support by subscribing, leaving a 5-star review, and telling your friends about us. Our Instagram and social media handles are at #NoonPodcast, NOON podcast. Your support is appreciated and keeps us going. All discussions presented on this podcast are strictly for informational purposes, awareness, and understanding. The advice presented is not and should not be considered to be therapeutic in nature. If you have any mental health questions, please contact your provider. All rights reserved.
At Blinds.com, it's not just about window treatments. It's about you, your style, your space, your way. Whether you DIY or want the pros to handle it all, you'll have the confidence of knowing it's done right. From free expert design help to our 100% satisfaction guarantee, everything we do is made to fit your life and your windows. Because at Blinds.com, the only thing we treat better than windows is you. Visit Blinds.com now for up to 50% off with minimum purchase plus a professional measure at no cost. Rules and restrictions apply.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.